What if Iron Man came into Star Wars? The void of hyperspace fractured like glass. A blinding tear ripped across the stars, spitting forth a single ship trailing smoke and molten metal. The craft tumbled helplessly toward the gleaming cityscape of Coruscant, its hull glowing red-hot from the impossible journey it had just endured. Inside, emergency systems blared as artificial gravity failed, sending tools and broken components floating through the cabin. Tony Stark fought to remain conscious. His armor, once a seamless marvel of Earth's most advanced technology, now hung from his body in half-melted plates. The heads-up display flickered with fragmented data, struggling to analyze the alien world growing larger through the viewport. "Friday," he gasped, tasting blood. "Status report. Multiple system failures," the AI responded, her voice distorted. "Arc reactor at 17% capacity. Dimensional anchor destroyed. Current location unknown." Tony's bloodshot eyes scanned the planet below. A world covered entirely in city, lit by billions of lights stretching across its surface. Not Earth. Not anywhere remotely familiar. "Sir," Friday continued, "I'm detecting thousands of artificial satellites, defensive platforms, and spacecraft in orbit. Their technology signatures do not match any known configurations." Before Tony could respond, warning alerts screamed through the cabin. 3 arrow-shaped vessels had broken formation to intercept his damaged craft. Their hulls gleamed white against the darkness of space, flanked by smaller fighters with distinctive hexagonal wings. "Interesting welcoming committee," Tony muttered, wiping blood from his brow. He tried to activate the armor's remaining thrusters, but only received sparking circuits for his efforts. The ship continued its uncontrolled descent, spiraling toward the massive cityscape below. The Imperial vessels moved with practiced precision. A tractor beam locked onto Tony's craft, halting its death, spiral and drawing it toward the largest ship's hangar bay. Inside the broken cockpit, Stark struggled to access the armor's defensive systems, but the power core flickered dangerously. "Sir, I recommend conservation of remaining power," Friday advised. "Hostiles have us in some form of gravitational lock. Resistance may not be advisable until we assess the situation." Tony grimaced. "When did you become so diplomatic?" The ship shuddered as it passed through the energy field separating the Star Destroyer's hangar from the vacuum of space. With a grinding impact, the craft settled onto the polished floor of the bay. Through the cracked viewport, Tony saw dozens of white-armored soldiers forming a perimeter, weapons raised. Behind them stood officers in gray uniforms, their faces taut with discipline and suspicion. "Friday," Tony whispered. "Run passive scans. Full spectrum analysis of their tech, weapons, any data you can gather. We need to know what we're dealing with." "Already in progress," the AI replied. "Sir, their weapons appear to be energy-based, similar to plasma technology but far more refined. The soldier's armor provides moderate ballistic protection but seems primarily designed for environmental hazards and identification." A commanding voice echoed through the hangar, amplified by unseen speakers. "Pilot of the unidentified vessel, you have illegally entered restricted Imperial space. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Tony took a deep breath. His armor was damaged, power nearly depleted, and he was surrounded by what appeared to be a highly organized military force in a reality he didn't recognize. The familiar weight of dread settled in his chest, the same feeling he'd experienced in that cave in Afghanistan years ago. Trapped, outgunned, but never outthought. "Friday, initiate emergency protocol Lazarus. Divert remaining power to life support and central processing." "Sir, that will leave the armor largely non-functional. Just enough juice to keep you running and keep me breathing. We need information before we need firepower." The armor powered down around him, plates loosening as the magnetic connections failed. Only the faint blue glow of the arc reactor remained, pulsing steadily beneath the damaged chest plate. Tony reached for the ship's hatch release. "Let's go meet the neighbors." The moment the hatch opened, blinding light flooded the cockpit. Tony raised his hand to shield his eyes, stepping cautiously onto the hangar floor. The white armored soldiers tightened their formation, weapons trained on his chest. An officer stepped forward, his uniform pristine, his face a mask of contempt. "Identify yourself and state your purpose in this sector." Tony straightened, wincing at the pain in his ribs. Despite his situation, he couldn't help but fall back on the persona that had defined him for so long. Tony Stark, genius, billionaire, philanthropist. Though I'm guessing my currency might not be accepted here. The officer's expression didn't change. "Your vessel is of unknown design. Your armor is unlike any registered in Imperial databases." He gestured to the damaged suit. "You will be detained for questioning. Any resistance will be met with lethal force." Tony considered his options. With the armor nearly powerless and Friday running on minimum capacity, fighting wasn't viable. Not yet. He needed time, resources, and most importantly, information. "No resistance here," Tony said, raising his hands slowly. "Just a traveler who took a very wrong turn." 4 stormtroopers approached, restraints ready. As they secured his wrists, Tony caught glimpses of the enormous hangar bay. Dozens of the hexagonal winged fighters lined the walls, pilots and mechanics moving among them with practiced efficiency. Beyond them, through the energy field, the endless cityscape of Coruscant stretched to the horizon. "Friday," he sub-vocalized, knowing the AI could still detect his words through bone conduction. "Keep recording everything. We need to understand where we are, what this empire is, and most importantly, how to get home." "Continuous passive data collection enabled," Friday responded, her voice now just a whisper in his neural interface. "Sir, I'm detecting unusual energy signatures throughout this facility, unlike anything in our database." "Catalog everything," Tony replied silently, "especially their power sources. If we're going to rebuild the armor, we need to know what we're working with." The stormtroopers led Tony through the cavernous hangar toward a turbolift at the far wall. Officers and technicians paused in their duties to watch the procession, their faces a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. One particular group caught Tony's attention, a cluster of officers surrounding what appeared to be a workbench, examining components of his damaged ship. "Already dissecting my ride," Tony muttered. "At least buy it dinner first." The lead stormtrooper shoved him forward. "Silence, prisoner." The turbolift doors closed around them, and Tony felt the subtle pressure of rapid descent. Through the transparent walls, he watched levels flash by, glimpsing more hangars, barracks, and what appeared to be research facilities. The Imperial war machine in all its terrible efficiency. The lift stopped at a detention level. Sterile corridors stretched in both directions, lined with sealed doors reinforced with energy fields. The stormtroopers marched Tony to a cell and deactivated the field just long enough to push him inside. The barrier hummed back to life behind him, casting the small room in a reddish glow. Alone at last, Tony sank onto the metal bench bolted to the wall. "Friday, status report. Arc reactor power at 14% and holding, passive sensors still functional. I've been analyzing their communications and data networks. This facility appears to be part of a galactic government they refer to as the Empire." Tony looked down at his damaged armor. "Can you access their information systems? Find us a map, technical schematics, anything useful?" "Their technology is advanced but fundamentally different from our own," Friday replied. "I've detected what appears to be their data infrastructure, but their encryption is unlike anything in my protocols." Tony nodded slowly, mind already racing ahead. "Keep at it. Focus on their power generation systems. Whatever's running this place has to be substantial." He ran a hand over the damaged arc reactor. "We're going to need a new energy source if we want to get out of here." Hours passed as Tony sat in his cell, seemingly passive but constantly observing, analyzing. Friday continued to gather data, building a fragmented picture of this strange new reality. The Empire, a galaxy-spanning government ruled through military might, references to a conflict with something called the Rebellion, and whispers, intercepted fragments of conversations about a power called the Force. The energy barrier deactivated, startling Tony from his thoughts. 2 stormtroopers entered, followed by an older man in a gray uniform adorned with rank insignia. His thin face was sharp with intelligence, his eyes calculating as they took in Tony's damaged armor. "I am Admiral Dovan," the man said, his voice clipped and precise. "Chief of Imperial Research Division. Your technology is most interesting, Mr. Stark." Tony stood slowly. Glad someone appreciates quality craftsmanship, though it's seen better days. Indeed. The Admiral circled Tony, studying the armor with undisguised fascination. "Our analysis of your vessel revealed technology unlike anything in Imperial records. And this," he gestured to the arc reactor, "a power source of remarkable efficiency, despite its apparent damage." Tony's eyes narrowed. "Just the family jalopy. You should see what I drive on Sundays." Admiral Dovan smiled thinly. "I believe I will, Mr. Stark. The Empire is always interested in advancing our technological capabilities. Your expertise could prove valuable. And if I'm not interested in helping, then you will remain here until you reconsider." However, the Admiral's voice softened slightly. "Cooperation would grant you certain privileges, access to our facilities, resources for your research, perhaps even the means to repair your armor." Tony recognized the offer for what it was. Not freedom, but a longer leash. Still, access to Imperial technology and resources might be his only chance to understand this world, to find a way home. "What exactly would you want me to help with?" Tony asked carefully. Admiral Dovan clasped his hands behind his back. "Nothing beyond your apparent expertise. Weapons, systems, power generation. The Empire rewards innovation, Mr. Stark. You could have a place here." Tony thought of the officers dissecting his ship, the military precision of everything he'd seen. An empire built on control and fear. It reminded him too much of what Stark Industries had once been, before Afghanistan, before Iron Man. But he needed time, resources, information. "I'm listening," Tony said. The Admiral nodded, satisfied. "You will be escorted to a secure workshop where you may begin repairs on your armor. Under supervision, of course. Demonstrate your value, Mr. Stark, and the Empire can be quite generous." As the stormtroopers led Tony from his cell, Friday spoke quietly in his mind. "Sir, I've intercepted communications regarding your technology. The Admiral has already reported to his superiors. Someone called Lord Vader has expressed personal interest." Tony kept his expression neutral, but a chill ran down his spine. Whoever this Vader was, the subtle change in the Admiral's posture at the name told Tony everything he needed to know. Fear, respect, danger. "Then we'd better make the most of our workshop privileges," Tony subvocalized. "Because something tells me we don't want to meet this Lord Vader without a fully functional suit." The workshop they brought him to was large but clearly designed as a secure containment facility. Transparent barriers separated different workstations, and security cameras tracked every movement. Still, Tony couldn't help but be impressed by the array of technology surrounding him. Equipment that was both familiar in purpose yet utterly alien in design. Admiral Dovan gestured to a workbench where the remains of Tony's armor had been arranged. "Your equipment has been thoroughly scanned for weapons or communication devices. You will find basic tools and materials here. Should you require anything specific, you must submit a request for approval." Tony approached the bench, hands moving instinctively over the damaged components. "I'll need power couplings, conductive materials, and access to whatever you use for advanced circuitry." The Admiral nodded to a nearby officer, who made notes on a datapad. "Reasonable requests will be accommodated. You will have 8 standard hours per day in this facility. Make progress, Mr. Stark, and your privileges may expand." With that, the Admiral departed, leaving Tony under the watchful eyes of 4 stormtroopers and several security officers. Alone with his broken armor and surrounded by Imperial technology, Tony felt a familiar surge of determination. He'd been in worse situations, built his first suit in a cave with scraps. This time he had Friday, fragments of his technology, and access to an advanced alien workshop. "Let's get to work," he muttered, picking up what appeared to be this galaxy's equivalent of a micro-welder. "Sir," Friday whispered through their neural link, "I should inform you that I've detected unusual energy readings from several storage containers in this facility. The signature doesn't match anything in our database, but it's extraordinarily powerful." Tony glanced casually around the room, spotting the secure containers along the far wall. "Keep monitoring. Whatever they're storing might be exactly what we need to power up again." For the next several hours, Tony worked methodically, repairing what he could of the armor while secretly studying the Imperial technology around him. The tools, while different in design, followed understandable principles of physics and engineering. What fascinated him most was their power systems. Everything seemed to run on some form of highly efficient plasma technology. As he worked, Friday continued gathering data, intercepting communications, and building their knowledge of this strange new galaxy. The pieces began to form a disturbing picture. "The Empire appears to be a totalitarian regime," Friday reported quietly. "I've detected references to planetary bombardments, mass arrests, and something called the Death Star, which seems to be a weapon of unprecedented destructive capability." Tony's hands stilled momentarily. He'd seen what weapons of mass destruction could do, had once built them himself. The thought of a regime possessing planet-killing technology sent a wave of cold fury through him. "Keep digging," he instructed. "Find out everything you can about this Death Star and any resistance against it." Days passed as Tony continued his work, carefully balancing genuine progress on repairing his armor with subtle investigation of Imperial technology. The Admiral visited regularly, increasingly impressed with Tony's apparent cooperation and technical expertise. "Your understanding of advanced principles is remarkable," Dovan commented during one inspection. "Perhaps tomorrow we might discuss applications of your arc reactor technology to our TIE fighter engines." Tony nodded agreeably while inwardly cataloging everything he'd learned. The Empire's TIE fighters, while fast, suffered from shield deficiencies and limited range, information that could prove useful. That night, alone in his cell, Tony reviewed the day's discoveries with Friday. "Those secure containers in the corner of the workshop," he whispered. "Any progress identifying what's inside?" "Yes, sir," Friday replied. "Based on intercepted communications and sensor readings, they appear to contain crystalline objects the Imperials refer to as Kyber crystals. They're treating them as highly valuable strategic resources." "What makes them so special?" "They appear to be focusing elements for energy weapons. The most powerful application mentioned is something called a lightsaber, a weapon used by individuals called Jedi and Sith. But more concerning, these crystals are also key components in the Death Star's main weapon system." Tony frowned. "Energy-focusing crystals? Like natural quantum amplifiers? That appears to be a reasonable analogy, though their properties seem to extend beyond standard physics. There are references to these crystals being somewhat sensitive to their users." "Sensitive how?" "Unclear. The data contains terms like attunement and resonance that imply some form of user-specific response. The Empire has been harvesting these crystals systematically from various planets, particularly one called Ilum." Tony's mind raced with possibilities. If these Kyber crystals could focus and amplify energy to the degree that made them valuable for superweapons, they might be exactly what he needed to power a new suit in this galaxy. "Tomorrow," he decided, "we need to get our hands on one of those crystals." The opportunity came sooner than expected. The following morning, as Tony was escorted to the workshop, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. The stormtroopers tensed, hands moving to their weapons. "Security breach in Sector 7, announced a mechanical voice over the intercom. "All personnel on high alert." The stormtroopers exchanged glances. "Take the prisoner back to his cell," ordered their leader. "Wait," Tony interjected. If there's a security issue, I should secure my technology. The armor components contain volatile elements that could be dangerous if tampered with. The troopers hesitated. Before they could decide, the lights flickered and emergency power activated, bathing the corridor in red. A distant explosion shook the floor beneath them. Rebel infiltration confirmed, the intercom announced. All security teams to battle stations. Chaos erupted. The stormtroopers were ordered to reinforce defenses elsewhere in the facility, leaving Tony with only 2 guards who hurriedly shoved him into the workshop and sealed the door. "Sir," Friday said urgently, "this may be our only chance." Tony nodded, moving swiftly to his workbench. The guards were distracted, constantly checking their communications for updates on the security breach. With practiced movements, Tony assembled the most functional pieces of his armor, connecting them to the arc reactor. "Power at 22%, Friday reported. "Enough for minimal defense systems and perhaps 1 repulsor blast." "Not enough for an escape," Tony muttered, glancing toward the secure containers holding the Kyber crystals. "We need more power." Another explosion rocked the facility, closer this time. The guards moved to the door, weapons raised. Tony seized the moment, attaching the partially functional gauntlet to his right hand. With a familiar whine, the repulsor glowed to life. "Sorry about this," Tony said. The guards turned just in time to see the repulsor blast, which sent them crashing into the wall. They slumped to the floor, unconscious but alive. Tony moved quickly, using Imperial tools to force open the secure container. Inside, nestled in protective padding, lay a collection of crystals that seemed to glow from within. They varied in size and color, some clear as diamond, others with hints of blue, green, or red. Friday, analysis. The crystals appear to be emitting energy on multiple frequencies, some beyond standard detection parameters. They're unlike any material in my database. Tony reached for one, a crystal about the size of his thumb with a pale blue glow at its center. The moment his fingers touched it, a strange sensation rippled through him, like an electric current, but somehow more aware. The crystal's glow intensified slightly. "Well, that's new," Tony whispered, staring at the crystal. For a brief moment, he thought he heard whispers, like distant voices speaking just below the threshold of hearing. "Sir," Friday interrupted, "security forces are regrouping. We have approximately 3 minutes before reinforcements arrive." Tony shook off the strange feeling and quickly gathered several crystals, storing them in a pouch taken from the Imperial supplies. Working rapidly, he assembled what components of the armor he could manage, creating a makeshift chest piece and single gauntlet. "Not exactly the Mark 85, but it'll have to do," he muttered. More explosions echoed through the facility. Whatever attack was underway, it was providing the perfect cover. Tony hurried to the door, pressing his ear against the metal to listen for movement outside. "Friday, can you access the security systems? Find us an exit route." "Attempting to connect now, sir. The attack has created vulnerabilities in their network security." Tony waited tensely as Friday worked. The sounds of blaster fire grew closer, punctuated by shouted orders and running footsteps. "I have partial access," Friday announced. "There appears to be a landing bay 3 levels up, currently engaged in emergency evacuation procedures. Several small vessels are being prepared for departure." "That's our ticket out," Tony decided. "Can you find us a path with minimal resistance?" "Maintenance, Shaft 17C is currently unmonitored. It connects to a service corridor that will bring us within 50 meters of the landing bay." Tony took a deep breath, clutching the pouch of Kyber crystals. "Lead the way." The maintenance shaft was narrow and dark, designed for droids rather than humans. Tony crawled through dust and cables, following Friday's directions through his neural link. The sounds of battle echoed distantly through the metal walls. "Sir," Friday said as they approached the exit point, "I've been analyzing communications during this attack. The infiltrators appear to be members of the resistance group called the Rebellion. Their primary objective seems to be data theft rather than destruction. Good to know we're not the only ones who disagree with the Empire's management style, Tony replied, pushing open the access panel and peering into the service corridor beyond. The corridor was empty, emergency lights casting long shadows. Tony moved swiftly, keeping close to the wall. As he approached the intersection that would lead to the landing bay, voices and footsteps forced him to duck into an alcove. A squad of stormtroopers ran past, followed by an officer shouting orders. "Secure the primary data core. Lord Vader will be arriving within the hour to personally oversee the response to this breach." Tony waited until they passed before continuing. The news of Vader's imminent arrival added urgency to an already desperate situation. He reached the final door separating him from the landing bay and paused, considering his options. "Friday, what are we looking at beyond this door?" Thermal signatures indicate approximately 20 life forms. Most appear to be concentrated near the larger vessels. There are 3 smaller craft positioned near the east wall that are minimally guarded. Tony nodded. The partial armor won't stop blaster fire, but the repulsor should give them something to think about. He reached for the door control. Sometimes you've got to run before you can walk. The landing bay was a scene of controlled chaos. Pilots rushed to their ships while officers shouted orders. Supplies were being loaded onto several larger vessels under the supervision of stormtroopers. No one immediately noticed Tony as he slipped through the door and stayed within the shadows of cargo containers. He made his way toward the east wall, where 3 small, wedge-shaped craft sat on their landing struts. They appeared to be courier vessels, built for speed rather than combat, perfect for a rapid escape. As Tony approached the nearest ship, a maintenance worker looked up from a control panel, eyes widening in surprise. Before the man could shout, Tony fired a low-powered repulsor blast that sent him tumbling backward into a stack of supply crates. The commotion drew attention. "Intruder, east perimeter," shouted a stormtrooper, raising his blaster. Tony ran for the ship, dodging blaster fire that scorched the floor around him. The repulsor gauntlet deflected 2 shots as he reached the vessel's ramp. Inside, he found a cockpit of unfamiliar design but recognizable purpose. "Friday, tell me you can interface with this thing." "Attempting connection now, sir. Their technology is different but follows logical design principles. Basic flight controls appear to be manual." Blaster fire struck the ship's hull as Tony slid into the pilot's seat. His hands moved over the controls, guided partly by Friday's analysis and partly by his own mechanical intuition. The engines hummed to life, repulsors lifting the craft from the hangar floor. "Sir, we have another problem," Friday announced. "The hangar doors are sealed due to the security alert." Tony grimaced, swinging the ship toward the massive doors. "Then we make our own exit." He diverted power to the ship's forward cannons, targeting the control mechanism for the hangar doors. The resulting explosion tore a jagged hole in the barrier, revealing the glittering cityscape of Coruscant beyond. With stormtroopers still firing from below, Tony pushed the throttle forward. The ship shot through the opening, scraping its hull but emerging into open air. Behind them, the Imperial facility receded as Tony navigated into the chaotic traffic lanes of the city planet. "We need to disappear," Tony said, banking sharply between towering buildings. "Find us somewhere in this urban maze where we can lay low and figure out our next move." Scanning for suitable locations, Friday responded, "I'm detecting areas of minimal Imperial presence in the lower levels of the city. Recommendations are being calculated." As the stolen ship dove deeper into Coruscant's labyrinthine undercity, Tony felt the weight of the Kyber crystals in his pocket. Their strange energy seemed to pulse against his awareness, a reminder that he was in a universe where the fundamental rules might be different from those he understood. "Sir," Friday said, "I'm detecting pursuit craft being launched from the facility." Tony pushed the ship faster, weaving between ancient buildings and industrial zones. "Then let's not make it easy for them." The ship plunged through the levels of Coruscant, leaving the gleaming spires of the upper city for the shadowed depths where sunlight never reached. Here, among the forgotten structures and forgotten people of the endless city, Tony Stark would begin to rebuild. Not just his armor, but his understanding of a galaxy far more complex and dangerous than he had yet realized. The undercity of Coruscant spread before Tony like a mechanical underworld, vast and labyrinthine. Artificial lights cast harsh shadows across crumbling infrastructure and makeshift dwellings. He guided the stolen Imperial shuttle through narrow gaps between ancient support structures, following Friday's guidance toward a sector with minimal surveillance coverage. "There," Tony muttered, spotting an abandoned loading dock jutting from the side of a derelict manufacturing complex. He set the shuttle down with a jarring thump, powering down systems to minimize detectable signatures. "Current location is approximately 700 levels below Imperial center surface," Friday reported. "Imperial presence in this sector is minimal, primarily automated customs checkpoints and occasional patrol droids." Tony leaned back in the pilot's seat, feeling the adrenaline of escape, giving way to the cold reality of his situation. Stranded in an alien galaxy, hunted by a tyrannical empire, with damaged technology and limited resources. He'd faced impossible odds before, but this was a new level entirely. "Damage assessment," he requested, examining the makeshift armor he'd assembled. "Arc reactor power at 17% and holding. Right gauntlet repulsor functional but limited to 2 more discharges at current power levels. Neural interface operating at 63% efficiency." Tony nodded, pulling the pouch of Kyber crystals from his pocket. They glinted in the dim light of the cockpit, seeming to capture and refract even the smallest illumination. "And our new friends here?" Friday paused before responding. "The crystals emit energy signatures unlike anything in my database. They appear to function as natural quantum resonators, but with properties that defy standard physical models. Most interesting is their apparent response to biological proximity." Tony raised an eyebrow. "They react to people? Not uniformly. Intercepted, Imperial data suggests the crystals respond differently based on the individual. Terms like attunement and resonance appear frequently in their research notes." Tony turned one of the crystals between his fingers, watching as the interior glow shifted with his movements. Again, he felt that strange sensation, like the crystal was somehow aware of his touch. "We need a more secure location," he decided, pocketing the crystals. "Somewhere we can work without Imperial interruption, but with access to materials." He left the shuttle, securing it as best he could before venturing into the Undercity. The air was stale and processed, tasting of machine oil and neglect. Beings of countless species moved through the shadowed thoroughfares, most avoiding eye contact. This was a place for those who wished to remain unseen. Tony kept his damaged armor partially concealed beneath a cloak taken from the shuttle's emergency supplies. The glow of the arc reactor was visible only as a faint blue light through the fabric. He moved purposefully, projecting confidence while studying his surroundings. "There's a market district approximately 400 meters ahead," Friday informed him through their neural link. "Local communications suggest it operates largely outside Imperial regulation." The market sprawled through what had once been a grand plaza, now cluttered with stalls and makeshift shops. Merchants hawked everything from mechanical parts to exotic foods. Credits changed hands alongside whispered information. This was an economy of necessity and opportunity, thriving in the Empire's shadows. Tony navigated through the crowd, cataloging potentially useful components and materials. His attention was drawn to a shop nestled in a recessed alcove, its entrance marked by salvaged ship parts arranged in a haphazard display. Inside, the space was crammed with technology from a dozen worlds. A Toydarian hovered behind a cluttered counter, wings beating lazily as he argued with a customer over the price of what appeared to be a power converter. Tony waited until the customer departed before approaching. The Toydarian's eyes narrowed, antennae twitching as he took in Tony's unusual appearance. "What you want, eh? Not running charity here." Tony smiled disarmingly. "Just browsing. I'm in the market for some specialized components, power couplings, microcircuitry, possibly a compact fusion generator if you've got one." The Toydarian's suspicion visibly deepened. Expensive tastes. You got credits to match? Tony reached into his pocket, producing a small component salvaged from the Imperial facility. A high-grade security encryption module, valuable to anyone operating outside Imperial law. I was thinking more along the lines of trade. The Toydarian took the component, examining it with expert eyes. His expression shifted from suspicion to calculated interest. Imperial tech. Very nice. Very illegal. He looked up at Tony. Where you get this, eh? Let's just say I recently parted ways with some Imperial acquaintances, without filling out the proper paperwork. The Toydarian laughed, a wheezing sound that ended in a snort. You got name, Offworlder? Just Tony. I am Velka. The Toydarian set the component on the counter. This worth something, yes. But what you asking for worth more? He gestured toward the back of the shop. Come, show you what I have. Maybe we make deal. Velka led Tony through a maze of shelving to a reinforced door. Beyond lay a workshop space filled with partially disassembled droids, ship components, and weapons in various states of repair. You mechanic, yes? Engineer, maybe? Velka asked, observing the way Tony's eyes assessed the technology. Something like that, Tony replied, already mentally cataloging what might be useful. Thought so. Hands have the look. Velka fluttered to a storage cabinet and unlocked it with a series of practiced movements. These components, very special. Not for regular customers. The cabinet contained higher-grade technology, including power cells, advanced circuitry, and precision tools. Tony selected several items, questioning Velka about their specifications and compatibility. You know your tech, the Toydarian commented, not like usual scrappers. Where you from that has such things? Tony paused in his examination of a power coupling. Very far away, farther than you'd believe. Velka snorted again. Galaxy big place. Seen many strange things. Stranger people. As they negotiated over components, Tony carefully questioned the Toydarian about local conditions, Imperial presence, and places one might find workspace without unwanted attention. Levels 1,726 through 1,842, mostly abandoned manufacturing, Velka eventually offered. Empire not care what happens down there. Old factories, good power infrastructure, no questions. By the time they concluded their business, Tony had acquired a collection of components that, while different from Earth technology, would serve his purposes. In addition to the encryption module, he traded detailed diagnostics on several of Velka's more problematic repair projects. You come back, bring more Imperial parts, Velka said as Tony prepared to leave. Always good price for you. Tony nodded. One more thing. These Kyber crystals the Empire's so interested in. Know anything about them? The Toydarian's wings stilled momentarily, his eyes darting to ensure no one else was within earshot. Dangerous question. Those crystals, they important to Empire, yes, but not just Empire. Jedi used them before, for their laser swords. Jedi? Velka's voice dropped further. Ancient Order, had powers, real powers. Empire destroyed them all. Now only Vader and Emperor have such powers, dark powers. He made a warding gesture. You stay away from Kyber business. Only brings trouble. Tony thanked the Toydarian for the warning, though it only intensified his fascination with the crystals. As he made his way back through the market, Friday analyzed what they'd learned. References to these Jedi and their powers appear in multiple Imperial security bulletins, she reported. They're described as enemies of the state, but with abilities that seem almost supernatural. The term Force-sensitive appears frequently. Force-sensitive, Tony repeated quietly. And these crystals are connected to that somehow. Following Velka's directions, Tony found his way to the abandoned manufacturing district. The massive factories stood like ancient monuments to forgotten industry, their structures sound but long emptied of workers and purpose. After exploring several buildings, He selected a facility that had once produced droid components. Much of the heavy machinery remained, along with a sealed maintenance office that would serve as a secure workspace. Over the next several days, Tony established his base of operations. He restored power to essential systems, repurposed machinery for his needs, and created rudimentary security measures, all while studying the technology of this strange galaxy, learning its principles and peculiarities. The Kyber crystals remained his most puzzling discovery. He conducted numerous experiments, documenting their unusual properties. They responded to electrical currents in unpredictable ways, sometimes amplifying energy, other times seeming to absorb and store it. Most intriguing was their apparent reaction to his presence, the internal glow intensifying when he focused his attention on them. "It's almost like they're responding to thought," Tony muttered during one late-night session. "Or emotion." The Imperial research notes mentioned attunement, Friday reminded him. Perhaps there's a psycho-responsive component to their functionality. Tony held one of the crystals between his fingers, studying the way light played through its facets. If these crystals really do respond to mental states, they could revolutionize the armor's interface system. He turned his attention to the workbench, where components of his new armor were taking shape. The original suit was beyond repair, but using Imperial technology combined with salvaged parts, he was creating something new. The design incorporated elements of his Earth technology while adapting to the materials and energy systems of this galaxy. "The power problem remains our biggest hurdle," Tony said, examining the arc reactor. "It's stable but insufficient for sustained operation of a full suit. The Kyber crystals may provide a solution," Friday suggested. "Based on my analysis, they could potentially amplify the arc reactor's output exponentially if properly integrated." Tony nodded, mind already racing with possibilities. A Kyber-enhanced arc reactor, potentially unstable, definitely experimental. He grinned. "My favorite kind of project." Over the following weeks, Tony worked relentlessly. The Undercity provided both resources and information as he cautiously established connections with those who operated beyond Imperial oversight. He traded technical expertise for materials and intelligence about the galaxy he now inhabited. Stories of the Empire's brutality, the struggling rebellion, and the mysterious force that both sides seemed to revere and fear. The new armor took shape, sleeker than his Earth designs but recognizably Iron Man. He incorporated Imperial technology where it improved functionality, adaptive camouflage systems, enhanced atmospheric shielding, and more efficient propulsion. But the heart of the suit remained uniquely his vision. The breakthrough came during his fifth attempt to integrate a Kyber crystal with the arc reactor. Previous attempts had resulted in power surges that overloaded systems or crystal fractures from incompatible energy patterns. This time, Tony approached the problem differently. "The crystals respond to focus, to intention," he told Friday, holding the pale blue Kyber that had been the first he'd taken from the Imperial facility. "What if instead of trying to force it into our technology, we build the technology around it?" He redesigned the reactor housing, creating a chamber where the crystal would be suspended in a magnetic field, free to resonate without physical constraints. The arc reactor's energy would flow around and through the crystal, rather than attempting to channel it directly. "Power connections complete," Tony announced, making final adjustments to the delicate circuitry. "Reactor containment stable. Beginning integration sequence." He carefully placed the Kyber crystal into the housing and activated the magnetic field. The crystal floated at the center of the chamber, pulsing with soft blue light that gradually synchronized with the glow of the arc reactor. "Monitoring energy flows," Friday reported. "Initial readings show stable interaction, power output increasing by 15%, 30%, holding at 47% increase without signs of instability." Tony watched as the light from the combined power sources cast blue shadows across his workspace. Success, but not enough. The armor would need significantly more power for full functionality. "It's working, but we need more," he said. The crystal is responding, but not at full capacity. He stared at the floating Kyber, remembering what he'd learned about their connection to the Force, to intention and focus. Perhaps. Tony closed his eyes, concentrating on the crystal. He thought of home, of the desperate need to return, to protect both his world and this new galaxy from threats like the Empire. He focused on his purpose, his identity as Iron Man. When he opened his eyes, the crystal's glow had intensified dramatically. The light pulsed in perfect rhythm with the arc reactor, no longer two power sources working in parallel but a single, unified system. Power output has increased by 300%, Friday announced, an unusual note of awe in her artificial voice. Sir, the crystal appears to be not just amplifying but transforming the energy. This signature doesn't match any known pattern. Tony felt a strange resonance, as if the crystal had somehow connected to him at a level beyond physical interaction. Record everything. We're breaking new ground here. With the power problem solved, Tony completed the armor rapidly. The suit incorporated the Kyber reactor at its center, with additional crystals integrated into the repulsor systems and neural interface. When fully assembled, it hummed with power that felt different from any previous version, something both technological and somehow more. Final systems check, Tony said, standing in the center of his workshop. The armor components lay arranged around him, ready for deployment. All systems nominal, Friday confirmed. Kyber integration stable across all subsystems, neural interface enhanced beyond previous parameters. Sir, this armor exceeds Mark 85 specifications in every category. Tony took a deep breath. Deploy. The armor assembled around him with fluid precision, plates locking together seamlessly. As the helmet closed over his face, the HUD illuminated with detailed information, more responsive and intuitive than ever before. How do you feel, sir? Friday asked. Tony flexed his hands, feeling the perfect balance of power and control. Like we just changed the game. He activated the repulsors, rising smoothly from the floor. The power flow was steady, stronger than any previous suit, yet somehow more efficient. As he moved, the armor felt like a natural extension of his body, responding to his thoughts almost before he consciously formed them. The neural interface is operating at unprecedented efficiency, Friday noted. The Kyber crystals appear to be enhancing the connection between you and the suit's systems. Tony landed gently, running advanced diagnostics as he considered his next move. With functional armor, he had options that hadn't existed before. He could attempt to find a way home, search for the technology needed to cross dimensions. Or he could confront the Empire, perhaps make contact with the rebellion he'd heard whispered about in the Undercity. The decision was made for him when the workshop's security alert suddenly activated. Imperial probe droid detected in Sector 7, moving in search pattern consistent with fugitive location protocols, Friday reported. Tony tensed. Friday reported, "They found us. The droid appears to be following a specific detection signature. Analyzing. Sir, it appears to be tracking Kyber radiation. The integrated crystals are emitting a unique energy pattern that Imperial sensors are specifically calibrated to locate." The implications were clear. His use of the Kyber crystals had created a beacon that the Empire could track, and if they found him, found his technology, the consequences would extend far beyond his own capture. "We need to move," Tony decided. "If they're tracking Kyber signatures, the lower levels won't hide us for long. Where will we go?" Tony considered their options. The rebellion. If anyone has an interest in keeping this technology out of Imperial hands, it's them. Based on intercepted communications, rebellion activity has been reported in several outer rim systems. However, making contact may prove difficult without established connections. Tony walked to a storage container and retrieved a small device he'd constructed during his weeks in hiding. A subspace communicator, built from Imperial parts, but modified to access encrypted frequencies. "Then we make some noise," Tony said. "The kind the right people will hear." He activated the suit's cloaking system, another innovation adapted from Imperial technology, and prepared to leave the workshop that had been his sanctuary. The Empire was hunting him, but they didn't know what they were really pursuing. Not just a man in a suit of armor, but Iron Man reborn through the strange alchemy of science and the Force. "Let's introduce ourselves to the neighborhood," Tony said, helmet closing over his face as he launched into the artificial sky of Coruscant's Undercity. The probe droid never reported back to Imperial Command. Its remains were found by a patrol, thoroughly destroyed by an energy weapon unlike any in Imperial records. The incident might have been dismissed as common Undercity violence, except for the message left encoded in the droid's own transmission frequency, broadcast wide enough for any listening post to receive. The Empire has a new problem, and his name is Iron Man. Lord Vader stood motionless before the viewport of his meditation chamber aboard the Star Destroyer Devastator. The endless starscape beyond held no interest for him. His attention was focused inward, on a disturbance in the Force. Faint but distinctive, a new presence unlike anything he had sensed before. The chamber door opened, admitting Admiral Ozzel. The officer approached cautiously, aware of Vader's displeasure with interruptions during his meditations. "My lord, we've received a report from Coruscant security forces. The fugitive from the research facility has destroyed an Imperial probe droid and left a message." Vader turned slowly. "What message?" The Admiral swallowed nervously. "He called himself Iron Man, my lord. Intelligence analysis suggests he has constructed some form of combat armor using stolen Imperial technology." "Not merely Imperial technology," Vader said, his mechanized voice betraying no emotion. "He has taken Kyber crystals. I can feel their resonance, altered but unmistakable. The Emperor has ordered maximum resources allocated to his capture, dead or alive." Vader turned back to the viewport. "Alive, Admiral. This Iron Man has touched something he does not understand. The Force works through the Kyber crystals, and he has bound them to his technology without comprehension of their true nature." "Yes, my lord. We have tracking teams deployed across 3 sectors based on the Kyber radiation signature. They will fail," Vader stated with certainty. "Prepare my shuttle. I will pursue this matter personally." As the Admiral departed, Vader contemplated what he had sensed. The Kyber crystals were responding to this stranger, this Iron Man, in a way that suggested potential Force sensitivity. Untrained, unconscious perhaps, but present, such individuals were rare and valuable, either as potential assets or threats to be eliminated. The Emperor would want this Iron Man captured, his technology studied, his knowledge extracted. But Vader sensed an opportunity beyond mere technological advancement. The stranger had unwittingly opened himself to the power of the dark side through his use of the Kyber crystals. That connection could be exploited, manipulated, turned. Aboard a stolen Imperial shuttle far from Coruscant, Tony worked on refining the suit's systems. The Kyber-enhanced armor performed beyond his expectations, but each use seemed to deepen the strange connection between himself, the crystals, and what this galaxy called the Force. "Sir," Friday interrupted his adjustments, "I'm detecting unusual power fluctuations in the primary Kyber crystal." Tony examined the readings. The crystal at the heart of his modified arc reactor was pulsing with energy that followed no discernible pattern. As he focused on it, the fluctuations intensified, as if responding to his attention. "It's almost like it's trying to communicate," he muttered. A sudden sensation washed over him, cold and oppressive, like standing in the shadow of something vast and terrible. The Kyber crystal flared with crimson light for a brief moment before returning to its normal blue glow. "Sir, your vital signs just registered a significant stress response. Are you all right?" Tony shook his head to clear it. "Yeah, just felt something weird, like we're being watched." Before Friday could respond, the shuttle's communication system activated without input, a holographic projection forming above the console. The image showed a hooded figure, face obscured in shadow. "You have something that doesn't belong to you, traveler," the figure said, voice distorted yet commanding. Tony approached cautiously. "I didn't realize I'd taken anything with a return address. The Kyber crystals. They are not mere tools for your machines. They are conduits of the Force, pathways between worlds. You have bound them to your will without understanding their nature, and in doing so, you have opened yourself to powers beyond your comprehension. Who are you?" The figure raised a hand, and Tony felt an invisible pressure around his throat, not enough to choke but a clear demonstration of ability. "Someone who recognizes potential. The crystals respond to you, which suggests sensitivity to the Force. Untrained, undisciplined, but present." Tony activated the armor with a thought, the Kyber-enhanced suit forming around him instantly. The pressure at his throat vanished as the crystals in the armor pulsed with defensive energy. "Impressive," the figure acknowledged. "Your technology merged with the Kyber creates something unique, but it also makes you vulnerable. The dark side flows through those crystals, especially the ones you took from Imperial containment. They were being prepared for use in weapons of unspeakable power, attuned to the dark side by Sith alchemical processes." "Dark side? Sith. You're going to need to provide a glossary with this conversation." The figure leaned forward slightly, the hood falling back just enough to reveal a glimpse of scarred, pallid skin. "The Force has two aspects, traveler. The light, embraced by the Jedi who are no more, and the dark, the path of power and freedom. The crystals you have incorporated into your armor were being prepared for dark side attunement. They resonate with anger, with fear, with the will to power. Every time you use your armor, they draw you further into the dark side's embrace." Tony felt a chill that had nothing to do with the shuttle's environmental controls. He had noticed something during intense moments using the suit, a heightened emotional state, flashes of rage or exhilaration that seemed amplified beyond normal response. "I'm not interested in your mystical sales pitch," Tony said. "What do you want?" "To offer guidance. The Empire hunts you, but they cannot provide what you truly need. Understanding of the Force now awakening within you, control of the power you have inadvertently tapped. And what do you get out of this generous offer?" The figure's hood fell completely back, revealing a woman's face, heavily scarred on one side, but with eyes that burned with intensity. "Balance. The Force is in turmoil. The Emperor and Vader dominate through the dark side, while the last embers of the light struggle to survive. You represent something unprecedented, a merging of technology and Force sensitivity that belongs fully to neither light nor dark." Tony deactivated the helmet, studying the woman's face. "You still haven't told me who you are." "I was once called Ahsoka Tano. I was a Jedi until I left that path. Now I walk my own way, serving the Force rather than dogma." "And why should I trust you?" Ahsoka smiled faintly. "Because unlike the Empire or even the Rebellion, I'm not asking for your technology or your allegiance. Only that you understand what you've connected yourself to before it consumes you. The Kyber crystals respond to your intentions, your emotions. If those turn to darkness, so will the power they channel." Tony considered her words, thinking of the strange sensations he'd experienced while using the armor. The heightened emotions, the perfect synchronicity between thought and action, the moments when the suit's power seemed to respond to his anger or determination. "Sir," Friday interjected via the neural link, "scans indicate the transmission origin is approximately 3 parsecs from our current position. A small moon in the Lothal system. If you wish to learn more," Ahsoka continued, "come to Lothal, alone. The Force will guide you to me." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Tony staring at empty air. "Well, that was cryptic," he muttered. "Friday, what do we know about Lothal?" "Primarily agricultural world in the Outer Rim. Significant Imperial presence due to mining operations and manufacturing facilities. Also noted for unusual natural formations called Jedi temples in historical records, though most have been destroyed by Imperial forces." Tony paced the shuttle's cabin, weighing his options. This Ahsoka offered information about the strange power he'd tapped into, but every instinct warned him of a potential trap. Yet the alternative was to continue using technology he didn't fully understand, power that was apparently changing him in ways he couldn't control. Plot: a course for Lothal, he decided. But we approach with extreme caution, full stealth mode, continuous scanning for Imperial forces. Course plotted. Estimated arrival in 7 hours at maximum safe speed. As the shuttle entered hyperspace, its swirling blue tunnel replacing the starscape, Tony examined the Kyber core of his armor. The crystal pulsed with steady light, but he could no longer see it as just another power source. Whatever this force was, he had connected himself to it through these crystals. And now he needed to understand exactly what that meant. The shuttle emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Lothal system, sensors immediately detecting the significant Imperial presence. A star destroyer hung in orbit around the primary world, with smaller vessels patrolling surrounding space. So much for a quiet approach, Tony muttered. Friday, can we reach the surface without being detected? The planet's unusual magnetic field creates detection shadows in certain areas. There is a 73% chance of reaching the surface undetected if we utilize these natural phenomena and maintain minimal power signatures. Tony activated the armor, feeling the now familiar resonance as the Kyber enhanced systems came online. Let's improve those odds. Divert power to stealth systems and set course for the least populated region showing those magnetic anomalies. The shuttle descended through Lothal's atmosphere, skimming low over vast grasslands, punctuated by distinctive rock formations that rose like petrified waves from the planet's surface. Tony followed the strange pull he felt through the Kyber crystals, a directional sense that couldn't be explained by conventional navigation. There, he said, indicating a particularly massive rock formation ahead. That's where we need to go. I'm not detecting any structures or life forms in that area, Friday noted. Trust me on this one. He landed the shuttle in the shadow of the great stone monolith, powering down all systems except basic life support. The armor's sensors detected no immediate threats, but the same strange sensation of being observed persisted. I'll continue on foot from here, Tony decided. Keep the shuttle ready for immediate departure. Sir, proceeding alone seems inadvisable given the circumstances. Sometimes you've got to run before you can walk, Tony replied with a grim smile. And sometimes you have to walk into an obvious trap to spring it. He exited the shuttle, the armor adapting its coloration to blend with the golden grasses and stone formations of Lothal. As he approached the monolith, the strange directional pull grew stronger, leading him to what appeared to be a solid rock face. Scan for hidden entrances or mechanisms, he instructed Friday. No conventional entrances detected. However, I am reading unusual energy patterns within the stone itself, similar to the resonance frequency of the Kyber crystals. Tony placed an armored hand against the rock surface. It felt solid, yet somehow not, as if the stone existed in multiple states simultaneously. The Kyber crystals in his armor pulsed in response to the contact. Sir, your neural patterns are showing unusual synchronization with the Kyber matrix. I recommend caution. Tony closed his eyes, focusing on the strange resonance between the crystals and the stone. As his concentration deepened, the solid sensation beneath his palm vanished. He opened his eyes to find his hand passing through the rock as if it were merely a hologram. That's new, he muttered, stepping forward. The passage through the stone was momentary, a transition between states rather than physical movement. Tony found himself in a vast, circular chamber, its walls covered in ancient symbols and images. At the center stood Ahsoka Tano, no longer a hologram but physically present, watching him with calm assessment. You came, she said simply. And you found the way in. That confirms what I suspected. Tony retracted the helmet, wanting to meet her gaze directly. And what exactly did you suspect? That the Force is awakening in you, drawn out by your connection to the Kyber crystals. This temple responds only to those sensitive to the Force. No technology, no matter how advanced, can breach its walls without that connection. Tony looked around the chamber, noting the perfect acoustics, the way light seemed to emanate from the stone itself. "Nice place you've got here, a bit minimalist for my taste." Ahsoka smiled faintly. The Jedi never were ones for extravagance. This temple has stood for thousands of years, a nexus point in the Force where those sensitive to its currents could seek guidance and training. "I didn't come here for a history lesson or mystical recruitment speech. I came because you said you could help me understand what's happening with the Kyber crystals in my armor." Ahsoka nodded, her expression growing serious. "Remove your armor, Tony Stark. Here, in this place, you need to feel the Force directly, not through the filter of your technology." Tony hesitated. Without the armor, he would be vulnerable. Yet something told him that if Ahsoka meant him harm, the armor would provide little protection in this place of power. "Friday, disengage but maintain standby mode," he instructed. The armor retracted, components folding into a compact form that remained within arm's reach. Tony felt suddenly exposed, the air of the temple cool against his skin after the regulated environment of the suit. "Now," Ahsoka said, "hold one of your Kyber crystals. Not in its housing, but in your bare hand." Tony removed the primary crystal from the modified arc reactor, the pale blue stone pulsing softly as it rested in his palm. Immediately, he felt the strange connection intensify, a resonance that seemed to flow between himself, the crystal, and the temple around them. "What you feel is the Force," Ahsoka explained. "It flows through all living things, binding the galaxy together. The Kyber crystals are especially attuned to its currents, which is why they've traditionally been used by both Jedi and Sith in constructing their lightsabers. So this Force, it's some kind of energy field? Like quantum entanglement on a macro scale?" Ahsoka smiled. "Your scientific mind seeks to categorize what cannot be fully measured or defined. The Force is energy, yes, but also consciousness, intention, will. The Kyber crystals respond to this, amplifying and focusing it according to the nature of the wielder." "And you're saying I'm, what? Accidentally Force-sensitive?" "The Force exists in your reality as it does in ours, though perhaps by different names or understandings. Your journey here, the dimensional barrier you crossed, may have heightened your connection to it. Or perhaps you always had the potential, and the Kyber crystals simply awakened what was dormant." Tony looked at the crystal in his hand, watching how its glow pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. "And the dark side you mentioned? What exactly is that?" Ahsoka's expression grew grave. "The Force has aspects, reflections of the nature of life itself. The light side flows from compassion, peace, harmony. The dark side draws power from passion, anger, fear. Both are natural, but the dark side corrupts when embraced fully, consuming those who surrender to its call." She gestured to the Kyber crystal. "The crystals you took from the Empire were being prepared through Sith alchemy to resonate with the dark side, to power weapons of mass destruction. By binding them to your technology, you've connected yourself to that corrupting influence." Tony felt a chill as he remembered the moments of rage, of terrifying clarity and power that had come when using the armor at full capacity. "So, what happens? I keep using the armor and turn into some kind of space wizard villain. The path to the dark side is subtle at first. Enhanced abilities, heightened emotions, the illusion of perfect control. But it demands more, always more. Fear becomes anger, anger becomes hatred, hatred becomes suffering. For yourself and others. And I suppose you're offering an alternative? The light side special membership package?" Ahsoka shook her head. "I am no longer a Jedi, and you are not meant for their path. Your connection to the Force is unusual, filtered through technology and intellect rather than traditional training. What I offer is understanding, so you may make informed choices." She held out her hand. "May I?" Tony hesitated, then placed the Kyber crystal in her palm. Ahsoka closed her eyes, her expression becoming serene as she communed with the crystal's energy. "It has bonded with you," she said after a moment. "Despite the dark side influence from its imperial preparation, your own nature has partially redirected its attunement." "Fascinating." She returned the crystal to Tony. "The Kyber responds to intention, to the heart of the wielder. Your use of them to power armor meant for protection rather than domination has begun to alter their resonance. But the dark side influence remains, a temptation that will grow stronger in moments of fear or anger. So, what's the solution? Abandon the most advanced armor I've ever created? No, but you must purify the crystals, attune them fully to your true intention rather than the dark side influence imprinted on them." Tony raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly does one purify magical space crystals?" "Through meditation, focus, and connection to the Force. Here, in this temple, the process will be easier. The light side is strong in this place." Tony looked skeptical. "Meditation was never really my thing. I'm more of an engineer than a monk." "Then approach it as you would a complex problem," Ahsoka suggested. "Focus your mind, your will, on the crystal's core. See the energy patterns within it, the currents of the Force flowing through its structure. Then redirect those currents according to your true purpose." Tony sighed but sat cross-legged on the temple floor, the Kyber crystal held between his palms. "So I just think pure thoughts at it. Focus on why you built your armor, not for power or domination, but for protection, for justice. Find that core intention within yourself and project it into the crystal." Tony closed his eyes, feeling slightly ridiculous but willing to try. He thought of the original Iron Man suit, built in a cave from scraps. The desperation to escape, yes, but also the revelation that his life's work had caused immeasurable harm. The armor had been his redemption, his way to protect rather than destroy. As his focus deepened, Tony became aware of the crystal between his palms growing warmer. In his mind's eye, he could see energy flowing through its lattice structure, currents of power that seemed to pulse with conscious intention. Some of those currents were jagged, aggressive, resonating with anger and dominance. The dark side influence Ahsoka had described. With engineer's precision, Tony imagined redirecting those currents, smoothing the jagged flows, harmonizing the discordant energies. He projected his core purpose into the crystal, not with mystical understanding but with the focused will that had driven him through countless innovations and impossible situations. "I am Iron Man, not a weapon, but a shield." The crystal pulsed with sudden intensity, its light visible even through his closed eyelids. Tony felt a surge of energy flow from the crystal into his body, not painful but overwhelming, like being caught in the center of an electrical storm that somehow carried emotion and consciousness within its currents. When the sensation faded, Tony opened his eyes to find the Kyber crystal transformed. Where before it had held a pale blue glow with occasional flickers of crimson, now it shone with pure, steady light, the exact color of the arc reactor's original illumination. Ahsoka watched him with quiet approval. "You have begun the process of purification. The crystal now resonates more closely with your true nature." Tony stared at the transformed crystal. That was intense. "The Force flows strongly through you, whether you name it such or not. Your will, your purpose, these are powerful currents that can reshape reality when properly focused." Tony stood, studying the crystal from different angles. "So the armor will be safe to use now? No more dark side influence?" "Safer, but vigilance will always be necessary. The dark side tempts through power, through the promise of control and dominance. Your armor grants these in abundance. You must remain mindful of your intentions each time you use it." A distant rumble interrupted their conversation, vibrations passing through the temple stone. Ahsoka's expression became alert, head turning toward the sealed entrance. "Imperial forces," she said grimly. "They've tracked your ship." Tony immediately recalled the armor, the components flowing around his body with liquid precision. The purified Kyber crystal slotted into the modified arc reactor, and Tony felt an immediate difference. The power flow was smoother, more responsive yet somehow less aggressive, enhanced but not dominating. "How many?" he asked, helmet forming around his head. "A significant force, I sense." Ahsoka paused, her expression darkening. "Vader. He's come personally. The big bad in the black cape I've heard so much about. Perfect timing for a proper introduction." Ahsoka's eyes flashed with warning. "Do not underestimate him. Vader was once one of the most powerful Jedi in the galaxy before he fell to the dark side. His command of the Force is unmatched, and he has destroyed countless Force sensitives since the rise of the Empire." Tony activated the armor's advanced scanning systems, now enhanced by the purified Kyber. The temple walls, previously opaque to sensors, became translucent in his display. Outside, Imperial landing craft were deploying troops, and a distinctive shuttle with angular wings was touching down at the center of the formation. "I count at least 60 stormtroopers, heavy weapons, and what I assume is Vader's personal ride," Tony reported. "They've surrounded the temple, though they don't seem to know exactly where the entrance is." "They will soon enough," Ahsoka said grimly. "Vader can sense the Force nexus within this temple, and now he can sense you." As if in response to her words, Tony felt a cold pressure against his mind, like icy fingers probing for weakness. The Kyber crystal in his armor pulsed defensively, creating a barrier against the intrusion. "Was that him? In my head?" Ahsoka nodded. "He's searching, feeling for your presence through the Force. The purified crystal offers some protection, but it won't hide you for long." Tony considered their options. "My shuttle has stealth capabilities. If we can reach it, we might slip past their blockade. Vader would sense the attempt. No, our only chance is to confront him directly, create a diversion significant enough to allow escape. Confront the guy who, according to you, has killed countless space wizards. That's the plan?" Ahsoka drew 2 cylindrical objects from within her cloak. With twin snaps of energy, blades of pure white light extended from each hilt, illuminating her determined face. "Not alone," she said. "Together, we might just survive." Tony's helmet analysis provided immediate data on the lightsaber weapons, their energy signatures similar to the Kyber crystals, but focused into coherent plasma blades. Incredibly efficient, devastatingly effective, and powered by the same Force energy now integrated into his armor. 2 against 60+ evil space wizard, Tony summarized. "I've had worse odds." He raised his repulsors, now glowing with the same pure light as the central crystal. "Let's introduce ourselves." The temple entrance rematerialized at Ahsoka's command, revealing the Imperial forces arrayed outside. At their center stood a figure in black armor, cape billowing in Lothal's wind, mask turned directly toward the opening, as if he had been staring at the exact spot all along. Darth Vader. Even through the armor's environmental systems, Tony felt the cold emanating from the Sith Lord, a tangible aura of menace and power. The Kyber crystals in the suit pulsed defensively, resonating with an instinctive recognition of ancient enemy. "The apprentice," Vader's mechanized voice addressed Ahsoka, "and the anomaly." His masked face turned to Tony. "Your technology has drawn my attention, outsider. The Empire has need of your expertise." "Sorry, not taking job applications at the moment," Tony replied, repulsors charging. "But I'm happy to provide a demonstration." Vader ignited his lightsaber, a blade of crimson energy extending with an ominous hum. "Resistance is pointless. The Kyber crystals you have stolen belong to the Empire. Your armor's power has been sensed by the Emperor himself. Submit, and you may yet serve a greater purpose." "Here's my submission," Tony said, firing both repulsors simultaneously. The enhanced beams, now carrying the purified Kyber energy, streaked toward Vader with devastating force. The Sith Lord raised a gloved hand, and the energy blasts curved around him, redirected to explode among unfortunate stormtroopers who were thrown like ragdolls by the impact. "Impressive," Vader acknowledged, "but futile." He gestured sharply, and Tony felt himself lifted from the ground, invisible force crushing the armor around him. Warning signals flashed across his HUD as the pressure intensified, metal groaning under stress that no physical attack could generate. "Sir, structural integrity compromised in multiple sections," Friday reported. "Power systems under extreme stress." Within the armor, Tony focused on the Kyber crystal at its heart, remembering the connection he had formed in the temple. The crystal responded, pulsing with protective energy that pushed back against Vader's force grip. Slowly, the pressure eased enough for Tony to activate his thrusters, breaking free of the invisible hold. Ahsoka used the distraction to attack, her dual lightsabers, a blur of white light, as she engaged Vader directly. The Sith Lord met her assault with methodical precision, his single red blade somehow always where it needed to be to block her strikes. Tony targeted the Imperial forces surrounding them, repulsors and micro-missiles forcing the stormtroopers into cover. His goal was to clear a path to the shuttle, to create the diversion Ahsoka had mentioned. But as he fought, he kept one eye on the lightsaber duel unfolding with impossible speed and grace. "Ahsoka Tano." Vader's voice carried even over the sounds of battle. "You have interfered with Imperial affairs for the last time." "I see only a shadow of my former master," Ahsoka replied, blades locked against Vader's crimson saber. "Anakin Skywalker was a hero. You're merely what remains after the Emperor's corruption. Skywalker was weak. I destroyed him." Their blades separated with a shower of energy, both combatants leaping back to reassess. Tony seized the opportunity, launching himself between them, unleashing a concentrated blast from his chest piece directly at Vader. The Sith Lord raised his lightsaber to deflect the energy, but the purified Kyber beam behaved unlike normal energy weapons. It split around the crimson blade, portions of the blast striking Vader's shoulder and leg armor. The Dark Lord staggered momentarily, genuine surprise emanating from him in cold waves through the Force. "The crystals recognize what you've become," Tony said, hovering above the battlefield, "and they reject it." Vader's response was immediate and terrifying. He extended both hands, and lightning the color of blood erupted from his fingertips, enveloping Tony's armor in crackling energy. Warning signals blared across the HUD as systems overloaded and failed. "Sir, power fluctuations. Critical," Friday reported, her voice distorting. "Kyber containment field destabilizing." Tony felt the crystal at his core pulse erratically, resonating with Vader's dark side energy. The corruption Ahsoka had warned about was happening in real time, the crystal's carefully balanced attunement being overwhelmed by hatred and rage. "No," Tony growled, focusing his will as he had in the temple. "You don't get to control this." He directed all his concentration on the crystal, on his purpose, on the core truth of Iron Man, not domination, but protection. Not destruction, but salvation. The crystal responded, its light purifying from corrupted red back to brilliant blue, then intensifying beyond anything he had yet witnessed. A shockwave of energy burst from the armor, dispelling Vader's lightning and throwing the Sith Lord backward. The stormtroopers nearest to Tony dropped unconscious, overwhelmed by the Force energy radiating from the enhanced armor. Ahsoka looked at Tony with astonishment. "The crystal," she said. "It's fully synchronized with you." Tony didn't fully understand what had happened, but he felt the difference. The armor was responding at levels beyond anything he had experienced, each system perfectly aligned with his thoughts and intentions. But he also felt a warning, a sense that this level of power was temporary, that the human and Kyber components were not designed to channel such energy for long. "We need to go," he said to Ahsoka. "Now." Vader was already recovering, his dark side powers regenerating his strength. Tony saw the shuttle not far away, still intact despite the battle raging around them. With new determination, he swept his arms in a wide arc, repulsors firing continuous beams that cut a path through the remaining Imperial forces. "Follow me," he called to Ahsoka, rocketing toward the shuttle. The former Jedi followed, her lightsabers deflecting blaster bolts as they retreated. Vader pursued, his rage a palpable thing that seemed to darken the very air around him. He gestured sharply, and massive boulders tore from Lothal's soil, hurling toward the fleeing pair. Tony spun in midair, firing precision blasts that shattered the projectiles. The strain on the armor and the Kyber crystals was mounting, power levels fluctuating dangerously as the enhanced systems operated beyond sustainable parameters. "Sir, structural integrity failing in multiple sections. Recommend immediate power reduction." "Not yet," Tony responded, pushing the armor harder. They were almost at the shuttle. A final, desperate attack came as they reached the vessel. Vader, focusing all his dark side power, reached out and seized the shuttle itself through the Force. Metal groaned as the ship began to implode, the hull buckling under invisible pressure. Tony made an instant decision. He diverted all remaining power to the armor's central repulsor, creating a focused beam of pure Kyber energy aimed at Vader. The blast caught the Sith Lord directly in the chest, breaking his concentration and sending him crashing into the stone monolith of the temple. "Get aboard!" Tony shouted to Ahsoka, who was already racing up the ramp. The shuttle's engines fired as Tony provided covering fire, keeping the disorganized stormtroopers at bay. As the ship lifted, Tony saw Vader rising from the rubble, his armor damaged but his lightsaber still burning with crimson fury. Their eyes met across the battlefield, a moment of recognition and promise. This was not their final encounter. The Force, the galaxy, destiny itself would bring them together again. Tony launched himself upward, the armor's flight systems struggling to maintain power as he reached the shuttle's closing ramp. He tumbled inside just as the vessel accelerated toward Lothal's atmosphere, leaving Vader and his Imperial forces behind. In the shuttle's cockpit, Ahsoka piloted with skill born from years of combat experience. "We can't return to known space," she said. "Vader will deploy the fleet to find us." Tony nodded, the armor retracting as emergency preservation protocols activated to prevent complete power loss. The Kyber crystal at its heart pulsed weakly, drained by the enormous energy channeled during the battle. "I need somewhere to repair and recharge," he said, "and to figure out what just happened with the crystals." Ahsoka entered coordinates into the navigation computer. "There's an old rebel outpost in the Dantooine system, abandoned now, but the equipment might still be functional. More importantly, it's strong in the light side of the Force. A good place to recover and plan our next move." As the shuttle jumped to hyperspace, Tony examined the armor's central crystal. Despite its weakened state, it shone with a purity and resonance that hadn't existed before. The connection forged in battle had changed both the crystal and himself in ways he was only beginning to understand. "You channeled the Force directly," Ahsoka said quietly, watching him. "Not as a Jedi or Sith would, but through your technology, your will. I've never seen anything like it." "I just did what needed to be done," Tony replied, though he knew it was more than that. The crystal had responded to him at a fundamental level, its energy becoming an extension of his intention rather than merely a power source. "Vader will not stop hunting you now," Ahsoka warned. "What he witnessed today will only intensify his interest. Your technology, combined with Force sensitivity, represents a power outside the Emperor's control. That cannot be tolerated." Tony's expression hardened. "Let him come. Next time I'll be prepared." The abandoned rebel base on Dantooine provided the sanctuary they needed. Hidden within ancient ruins that predated even the Old Republic, its remaining equipment gave Tony the resources to repair and enhance the armor. Ahsoka guided him in deeper understanding of the Force and the Kyber crystals, while he applied his engineering genius to creating defenses against Vader's powers. The crystals became the heart of a new design, one that merged Tony's technological brilliance with the mystical energy of this galaxy. The armor evolved, sleeker and more efficient, with integrated lightsaber defenses and Force-responsive shielding. Each improvement balanced power with purpose, strength with restraint, reflecting Tony's growing understanding of the dangerous equilibrium between light and dark. In quiet moments, as Dantooine's twin moons cast silver light across the ancient ruins, Tony thought of home, of Earth, so impossibly distant now. The dimensional calculations required to find a way back were beyond even his enhanced systems. This galaxy, with its conflict between Empire and Rebellion, between dark side and light, had become his reality. And perhaps, he reflected, watching Ahsoka demonstrate lightsaber forms that he adapted into the armor's combat protocols, this was where he was meant to be. Iron Man had been born from captivity and desperation, forged in conflict against those who would use power to dominate others. Here was a struggle that demanded such a defender, a war between tyranny and freedom that spanned an entire galaxy. 3 standard months after their escape from Lothal, as Tony completed the final calibrations on the newly designed armor, Ahsoka received an encrypted transmission. Her expression grew grave as she decoded the message. "The Empire has accelerated construction of the Death Star," she reported. "The Kyber crystals they've been harvesting are being used to power a super laser capable of destroying entire planets. The Rebellion is desperate for anything that might counter such a weapon." Tony looked at the armor, now resplendent with purified Kyber energy flowing through its enhanced systems. No longer merely a suit of advanced technology, but a conduit for the Force itself, shaped by his unique connection to both scientific brilliance and newly awakened sensitivity. "I think it's time Iron Man introduced himself to the Rebellion," he said, the helmet forming around his head, eyes glowing with determination. "And showed the Empire what happens when you build weapons of mass destruction in my neighborhood." Ahsoka smiled, her lightsabers igniting with twin snaps of energy. "The Force works in mysterious ways, Tony Stark. Perhaps your arrival in our galaxy was no accident, but destiny." Tony thought of the implausible journey that had brought him here, the tear in reality that had seemed so random, so disastrous. Now it appeared as something else entirely, a calling, a purpose that transcended dimensions. Iron Man had always been about redemption, about using his genius to protect rather than destroy. Here was a galaxy in desperate need of exactly that mission, that symbol. And this time, he had not just technology at his command, but the Force itself, channeled through crystals that responded to his deepest intentions. As they prepared their ship for departure to the hidden rebel base, Tony felt the Kyber crystal at his armor's heart pulse with steady, determined light. Not the cold brilliance of the dark side, nor the rigid purity of Jedi tradition, but something uniquely his own. A third path, where science and mysticism merged to create something new. The Empire had unleashed a terror upon the galaxy, but the galaxy had summoned its answer from across dimensions, and his name was Iron Man.